Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. In this video I'm going to address the sacred name movement, the whole Jesus versus Yeshua thing. Now at some point or another, every Christian is going to encounter this, doctrine, and a lot of people are seduced by it because they have a desire to really serve God and call upon Him truly. And so a lot of people, because of their lack of knowledge and they're not rooted in sound doctrine, they become vulnerable to this tactic that the enemy uses. And at one point I got sucked into this whole name thing, and this was before I was saved, when I was just doing research and kind of seeking truth and listening to different things. This is one of the things that I came across and got and kind of bought into for a very short period. And looking back at it, I find it funny that I spent a lot of time in the whole researching the whole name thing, and I never actually got to know the person. It never led to me getting born again. It never led to me developing a relationship with Jesus. It only led to pride, and I became an evangelist. I was literally an evangelist of this sacred name foolishness, because I would go to Christians that I knew and I'd be like, Jesus wasn't his real name, right? And I would go into all this stuff. And I just look back at it like, wow, I was deceived. I was completely deceived. And so if you've bought into this movement, I want the information in this video to help you come out of it and see it for what it is. Because it's self-righteousness and it's pride. And a lot of it is just plain ignorance and stupidity. Because what I've noticed is, among a lot of these sacred name movement groups, is most of them don't know Hebrew at all, yet they're trying to teach you Hebrew. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to let anybody teach me anything if they don't know what they're talking about. If I'm trying to learn another language, I'm not going to learn it from somebody who doesn't know the language. That's just common sense. Yet people make all these websites and all these movements and all this stuff talking about they know the real name because of a little bit of research they've done. Now, if you've done some honest research, you would know and come to the conclusion that the name Jesus in Hebrew is Yeshua, not Yahushai or anything weird like that. People who come up with weird variations like that are just plain ignorant. They don't know what they're talking about. Now, it's Yeshua. You know what I mean? And they'll go off into all these tangents, and even these groups contend with each other about which name is accurate and wrong and this and that. So it's a giant waste of time. Now, just to share some information that I pulled up real quick, according to Wikipedia, the sacred name movement began with the Church of God, Seventh Day, not to be confused with the Seventh-day Adventist, in Christianity, propagated by Clarence Orville Dodd from the 1930s, which claims that it seeks to conform Christianity to its Hebrew roots. Okay, so you'll see this thing, this Hebrew roots movement, the black Hebrew Israelites, and they will perpetuate this sacred name thing, and it often ties into keeping the other traditions and, the Old Testament laws and ceremonies and the Sabbath and the Torah festivals and the kashrut food laws, in Leviticus and all these things. And they often go hand in hand, especially in a lot of these Hebrew roots movement. They go into those things, into keeping the Torah and all these things. Now, I have nothing against people who keep certain laws like Sabbath and things out of, a personal conviction, but to teach it as doctrine, as a command, is error. It's complete error. Now, some people take it to the extreme and say it's a salvation issue. You're calling upon Jesus, which means hail Zeus. It's a pagan god. And if you use the name Jesus, you're not saved. That's one extreme that people will take it. And then there's the other, which, it's just Yeshua is his name in Hebrew. If you personally feel like calling him Yeshua, that's your business. But to say the name Jesus is pagan, or it means hail Zeus, that's ignorance. That's somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, because if you actually look into the Greek, there is no similarities between Zeus and Jesus when written in Greek. And I'll leave a link below of a video that does just that and shows you There is no similarities, there is no connection whatsoever. So people who actually say that don't know what they're talking about. And you can just write them off and disregard them and not have your time wasted. So, now there's other information that people might present to you, like, the book of Matthew was originally written in Hebrew, which is why Yeshua is his real name. Now, I wasn't alive during the time Jesus walked the earth, so I can't say what they called him. In Greek, it was Iesus. It was Iesus. That's what it was written in Greek. And all the manuscripts we have of the New Testament are in Greek. None of them are in Hebrew. People who say that the book of Matthew was written in Hebrew, that's pure theory and conjecture. It's not factual evidence that we have today. It's just theory. They will say that Papias of Hierapolis, basically what it reads is, Papias of Hierapolis wrote, Matthew collected the oracles, logia, sayings of or about Jesus in the Hebrew language, perhaps alternatively Hebrew style. By Hebrew, Papias would have meant Aramaic, the common language of the Middle East, beside Koine Greek. And on the surface, this implies that Matthew was originally written in Hebrew or Aramaic, but Matthew's Greek reveals none of the telltale marks of a translation. Meaning the scholars who look at the Greek manuscripts of Matthew and things like this, none of them give any clue as to them being translated from Hebrew. There is Hebrew translations of the Greek of Matthew, but there is no original Hebrew of the book of Matthew that we know of. It's pure theory. And that's just from the research that I gather. That's just from what I see. And it makes sense because out of the thousands and thousands of manuscripts we have, they're all in Greek. None of them are in Hebrew. They're in other different languages and stuff like that, but there is no Hebrew ones that are originals. Okay? So this goes on to say, I pulled up this quote, no ancient Hebrew manuscript of the New Testament has ever been found from the early centuries of Christianity. The oldest are Greek. The oldest papyrus fragment, a portion of the Gospel of John, dates back to the late 2nd century, so the manuscript evidence alone weighs heavily against the concept of Hebrew originals. So, that's just facts. If that offends you, that is what it is. It's just facts. So, people will say things like, well, the letter J is only 500 years old, or however old it is. And yeah, that's true. But as times change and languages, change or evolve or whatever, there's going to be changes made within languages, especially when translating names. For example, in Hebrew it's Yeshua, but in the Greek language there is no, letter J or letter Y. So there's no letter Y, so I guess the closest thing to the letter Y, if you're translating into the Greek, is the letter I, which is Iesus. Okay, so Iesus is a proper transliteration into Greek from the Hebrew Yeshua. That's just how it is. And the proper accurate translation into English from the Greek Iesus would be Jesus. It would be Jesus. There's nothing wrong with using that name. It's not pagan. It's not wrong. If you speak English, his name is Jesus. If you speak Greek, his name is Iesus. If you speak Hebrew, his name is Yeshua. There is no real problem. You understand? If you speak Spanish, it's Jesus. There is no problem. I'm going to, I'm going to play a video actually by Jacob Prash who covers this topic, and, just let him talk about it because he actually knows Hebrew. He actually knows Greek. He's fluent in those languages, can read and write in them and all that stuff. So I feel that his words hold more weight than mine because I'm not a scholar in these languages. However, I know what the facts are and I'm just sharing them with you. And, I'm not a scholar in the Greek language. There's declensions and the different tenses and the nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, different declensions that are grammar rules when dealing with a different language, especially the Greek, and translating. There's grammar rules that you have to take into consideration when there's no letters, like there's no letter Y in the Greek. So you have to make these transliterations accurate based on, the things you have in that language and stuff. So, you know, I'm not going to try to be some scholar and act like I know everything. All I know is that his name is Jesus in the English language, and it's a proper translation of the Greek name Jesus. You know what I mean? So another point that I wanted to cover is also, you know, in Acts 7:45 and Hebrews 4:8, it says Jesus when it's actually talking about Joshua in the Old Testament. The reason why, and some of you may know this or have heard this before, you know, the name Jesus and the name Joshua are essentially the same name, especially in the Greek language. And, you know, it just means Jehovah is salvation. And, you know, again, Joshua was a popular name back then. Jesus was a popular name back then, or, you know, Jesus, however. But it is what it is. It was a popular name in Colossians 4:11, and Jesus, which is called Justice, this is talking about a Jewish Christian that was evangelizing with the Apostle Paul. Colossians 4:11. It's not talking about Jesus the Messiah. It's talking about a different guy named Jesus, which is called Justice. Okay? But Joshua and Jesus are essentially the same name. In English, they're different. In the Greek, they're not different. You understand? So you need to understand the context of what's going on. See, if you have a King James Bible, Acts 7:45 and Hebrews 4:8, it says Jesus instead of Joshua. In 1611 original King James Bible, there was no letter J, it was Jesus. You understand? Because that was just them being honest with the Greek manuscripts, which read Iesus, I-E-S-O-U-S. There was no letter J. You understand? Because that didn't come until way later. But, you know, the whole Jesus meaning Hail Zeus, I'll leave a link in the description below that debunks that, and you can look at the Greek laid out right before you, and you'll see there's no similarities and no connection, just for your information. And, you know, another point that I wanted to talk about before I play that clip by Jacob Prasch is, you know, getting sucked into the name is the diversion of Satan to keep you distracted from getting to know the person. As I've mentioned, you know, when I was in that whole sacred name movement for a brief point in time, I was not at all seeking the person. I was only worried about the name. And again, it comes back to the pride and the self-righteousness and things of that nature. But I never got to know the person. And this is exactly what Satan wants. And then they'll get into the whole sacred name of the Father. You know, it'll be Yahuwah or Yahweh, the Tetragrammaton or whatever. Or, you know, Jehovah and Yahweh and all these things. And they'll get really sucked into it and convinced about certain things. But nowhere in the New Testament did Jesus ever tell us to call God anything other than Father. Have you ever noticed that? That literally in John 17:25-26 says, Jesus said, O righteous Father, the world hath not known thee, but I have known thee, and these have known that thou hast sent me, and I have declared unto them thy name. Now people will try to use this scripture to perpetuate the sacred name, you know, doctrine. And will declare it, that the love wherewith thou hast loved me may be in them, and I in them. John 20:17, Jesus said unto her, Touch me not, for I am not ascended yet to my Father, but go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father. You know what I mean? Romans 8:15, For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. Nowhere in the New Testament does it say to call God anything other than Father if you are born again. The word Father occurs over 300 times in the New Testament, around 250 of which refer to God directly. Yahuwah, Yahweh, Elohim, Jehovah, Adonai, etc. occurs 0 times in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, God is called Father less than 20 times. So isn't that interesting that Jesus came to make the Father known? He has declared unto them thy name. And what did Jesus call God? Called him Father. He didn't call him Jehovah. He didn't call him Yahweh. He didn't call him anything other than Father. He said, my Father and your Father. whereby we cry, Abba, Father, if you've been born again. I just find it so interesting how Satan is diverting people into calling God something other than what he wants to be called if you're accepted in the beloved. You know, it's just people. Another point I wanted to say is people never call their dad by their name because they have a special relationship with them as their one and only dad. Have you ever thought about that? If you have a relationship with your dad, it's kind of weird to call him by his first name. You know what I mean? You call him dad. He's dad. And if you think about it, everyone else calls him by his name, but you call him dad because you have a special, unique relationship with him and only him. The same way it is with God. You're supposed to have a unique, special relationship with him through Jesus, and you know him as Father. Wouldn't it be weird to call your dad by his name all the time? If he's supposed to be your dad and you have a good relationship with him? Wouldn't that be kind of awkward? But I guess it's not awkward for these sacred namers, probably because they don't have a real intimate relationship with him as their father. I just think that's an important point that needs to be made. Out of all the Greek manuscripts, even in the Bible itself, the number one thing Jesus called God was Father. And he taught us to do the same. How do I know that? Look at the prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven. He didn't say, O Yahweh, who art in heaven. O Elohim, Yahuwah, who art in heaven. O Jehovah, who art in heaven. No, he said, Our Father, who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name. Father. He's to be hallowed. He's sacred. He's God. He's Father, and he wants to be known as Father. And I just find it amazing that God is called Father not very much in the Old Testament at all. But in the New Testament, it's hundreds of times. It looks to me that Jesus was making something clear. That none come to the Father but by him. And the Father of Jesus is the same Father of those who are born again. That's why we cry, Abba, Father. Our Father, who art in heaven. You understand, guys? I hope that information was helpful to you. But again, I'm going to play this clip by Jacob Prash, and I hope it, is edifying and that it provides information to let you know that this whole sacred name thing, you just take a step back, realize it's not that serious. People who try to say you're worshiping a pagan god, they don't know what they're talking about. You need to call on to him out of a pure heart. God knows your heart. If you want to use the name Yeshua, that's fine. If I'm talking to Jews and I'm in a Jewish setting, yeah, maybe I'll use the name Yeshua, not to offend somebody. Because, in Israel and to some Jews, the name Jesus involves negative connotations. It's not a positive figure. You know what I mean? So you have to have discernment when speaking to different people. But I was saved in the name of Jesus. I cast demons out of people in the name of Jesus Christ. And they manifest and they are casted out of people. So I've seen the power that is in the name Jesus Christ. It's in the Bible when I read it in English. So are you telling me I can't trust it? I have to become a Hebrew scholar in order to be saved now? It's foolishness. People are so limited. And you have to be delivered from that and not taken captive by pride and self-righteousness. His name's Jesus. If you speak English, there's nothing wrong with that name. I baptize people in Jesus' name. I speak English and I know what the English name is, and it's Jesus. There's nothing wrong with it, guys. So I hope this clip by Jacob Prash helps you guys. If you have any questions, leave a comment or email me. I'll get to you when I can. Otherwise, be blessed in Jesus Christ's name, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
We receive a fair amount of email from people who are obviously involved or influenced by something that is generally referred to as the sacred name movement or something of that nature, where they insist you call Jesus Yeshua, but they try to actually pronounce the Aramaic or Hebrew Yehoshua or Yeshua. I received one just the other day from somebody who was always trying to use Hebrew terminology, but he was using the wrong terms. For instance, anti-Messiah. In Hebrew, nobody would know what the anti-Messiah, that is Antichrist, is. The term in Hebrew is Sodom Moshiach. this movement is rather silly because the people who are in it and promoting it, obviously, they by and large, if there's any exceptions, I don't even know of any, don't know Hebrew themselves. Their insistence is the name Jesus has to do with pagan worship, and it was introduced into the church under the influence of Satan, and it had to do with pagan worship in the Greco-Roman world, that Jesus must be called Yehoshua or Yeshua, something of this nature. First of all, of the Gospels alone, we have 10,000 major manuscript fragments. The volume of codexes of the New Testament outstrips anything from the ancient world. We have approximately 20,000 fragments of the New Testament, going all the way back to the Tison text. We have a first century fragment of John. Now, considering there are only 420 of Caesar's conquests in Latin and 10,000 of the Gospels plus, it shows you the early church devoted a lot of attention to preserving the ancient manuscripts. There is a historical reference from Hegesippus and Papias that Matthew was written in Hebrew, but that very well could have been the Hebrew dialect of Aramaic, something similar to something I've mentioned before, the Peshitta text. The earliest Syriac manuscripts we have, the earliest Aramaic manuscripts we have, were themselves not Aramaic originals, but copied from Greek. Now, something did happen in the 7th century and the 8th century. The Muslims destroyed and burned many Christian libraries, including 2 major ones in what is today Lebanon, destroying many ancient manuscripts. But there are copies of these, and there are others, sources, multiple fragments, 10,000 just of the Gospels. Every one of them calls Jesus, Jesus, every one of them. There is no source manuscript saying anything else. John in English. In Old English, John was Ian. In Old Celtic Irish, it was Sean. In Latin, Johannes. In Dutch and Germanic languages, Johann. Hebrew, Yohanan. But it's all John. What's the problem? French, Jean. What's the problem? There is no problem. Jesus is simply the Greek translation of his name, Yeshua. Yeshua is a post-exilic variation of Joshua, Yehoshua. If you pronounce it as Yeshua, it means salvation. But it derives from Joshua, Jehovah is salvation. There is no problem no more problem putting his name into the Greek language as Jesus or Jesu Christe or whatever than there is translating snow, shelig from Hebrew as snow. There's no more problem. This whole sacred name movement is rather silly. It takes on a cultic dimension, but the people who are propagating it are largely ignorant. The ones who contact us, they try to use Hebrew terminology for things, and they're using the wrong terminology. They don't know what they're talking about. Sometimes these things reach the level of a crackpot. There's some crazy guy who dresses up like the high priest in Jerusalem. I think he's an Australian, misrepresenting himself as an expert on the Hebrew roots of the Christian faith, and he tries to write Hebrew words and he can't spell, and Israeli would laugh at him. Please, don't pay attention to this stuff. Now, what I would say is, we put the emphasis on the original manuscripts in the original languages. That's where we put the emphasis, Nehemiah 8:8. God's name is Yehovah, Yehovah, Asher Haya Hove Yavo, He who was, who is to come. That is the ineffable God. God becomes a man in the person of Jesus, Yeshua. You can call him Yeshua if you're Jewish or Israeli or married to a Jew or whatever. I have no problem calling him Yeshua. I have no problem calling him Jesus. I have no problem calling him Jesu Christe. I have no problem calling him any of those things. In Arabic, it's Yeshua. Any more than I have a problem calling someone named Yohanan John, or Johannes, or Jean, or Ian, or Sean. It's the same name. It doesn't mean anything. As long as we bear in mind the priority is on the originals. But in the case of the name of Jesus, all of the manuscript evidence we have uses Jesus. That's what he was called in the Greek language, in the Greek world. Jesus. Now, some people would say, but there's pagan names and pagan gods that are similar. And you know what? In Aramaic, Allah is the name of the Nabatean moon god. But as a common noun, as a generic term, it's simply a word for God. This is all silliness. The name Jesus, the Mormons have a different Jesus. The Eucharistic Jesus of the Roman Church is different. The Jesus of the Muslims is different, and the Jesus of the Jehovah's Witnesses is different. I've said this. But it's just the name, Jesus. There are positive characters in the scripture named Judas as well as bad ones, Yehuda. There is a good person named Saul, Shaul, in the scriptures. That's Paul the Apostle, but he was called Saul. And there was King Saul, who was a terrible backslider. This name stuff and the obsession with it and getting the name right, this stuff is ridiculous. It's based on ignorance, and frankly, it's cultic. It is an extreme element of the Hebrew root movement gone absolutely mad. Do not pay attention to it. My name is Jacob Prasch. God bless and thank you for listening.